This video is filmed in front of a live studio audience today. So. Hey guys, Aaron Schober and Josh Lucas from Sword Carolina once again, coming at you with the last of the Meisterhau today, the Scheitelhau.
The long-awaited and highly anticipated.
The long-awaited and highly anticipated, Josh. Yes, thank you. Scheitelhau is a vertical Oberhau. So the way we normally do an Oberhau is much more along the lines of the Zornhau, where I'm coming in diagonally, ending up in a plow type guard. The Scheitelhau is a vertical cut, where I'm going to be coming straight down, aiming at the other person's scalp, at their face. Now, when I'm doing a vertical cut, I could cut all the way down to the ground into Alber. The Scheitelhau, though, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my hands high at the end point. So as I cut, I'm going to keep my hands up. This is going to keep my range at its maximum, and it's going to allow me to lead into the follow-up techniques we're going to get into. It's also going to keep my hands a little bit safer. If Josh is fighting low, if he's fighting down low in a low plow or an Alber, this is when I would tend to use the Scheitelhau. One of the things he may do is if I attack with my hands low, he may be able to come up and hit me in the hands while at the same time, moving to the side or moving back to allow me to miss him. So to counteract that, I'm going to keep my hands up high to where now he's going to have a very difficult time doing that without being hit himself. So I'm cutting directly at my greatest range. I need to do that because this is what's going to keep me safe, because I'm actually not in a position to defend any part of my body. I'm not defending any of my openings. So I'm keeping it at the greatest range so that it's going to be harder for him. He won't be able to hit me without being struck himself. Right. Now, if I'm throwing a Scheitelhau at Josh, one of the ways that he could block it is in a position called cron, or crown. Now, when it's describing cron in the text, it says that both his point and his hilt are above his head. That could be vertical like this, that could be angled at the side. A lot of times we will come in horizontally with it in here, if for no other reason than our ceilings are rather short. So rather than damage our lights, again, we'll come up a little more horizontal. But you'll often see blocking vertically with it too. At any point, his hilt is going to be above his head. When we look at a position or a strategy being defeated, you tend to think that, wow, that must be a stupid idea. So in this situation, we're defeating cron. That doesn't necessarily mean that cron is a bad option. That cron, it can be a very good choice. Number one, it does protect you against the Scheitelhau, so you're not having your head split in half, or even your scalp split in half. But it also lends itself to some of its own attacks. I attack with the Scheitelhau, Josh blocks in cron. If I do not immediately continue with my attack, he has the options of doing lots of different things. He can wind over and thrust me from there. Let's do a couple other options. Sure. Attack here. He can come in with a Schnappen type movement. He could probably come in with a Scheitelhau or something similar to that. So it's not that the cron is a bad thing, it's just that there's ways to counteract it. What I'm going to do from there, if he has blocked my Scheitelhau, I'm actually going to grab my pommel and lift my pommel up to thrust over his sword. The way I've always done this in the past would be to wind up into a left ox to thrust down. However, one thing we've been experimenting with a lot more lately is grabbing the pommel and giving us a little more freedom of movement. So what we've done this week, as I come in here, if I want to get my point over his sword, I can actually grab my pommel, and without even minding, I can thrust over his sword to his face. It allows me to be able to move to either side defense from after that. Now, if I'm fast, I'll stab him right in the face right there. What he's probably going to do is he's going to have to lift his sword up even higher to defend against that. And he's very likely going to push me off one side or the other. So, Josh, I've attacked you here. I'm going up to thrust him. If he pushes me aside, I'm going to yield with his pressure, and I'm actually going to wind into ox. I'm going to wind into whichever one is going to be easiest for me to get to using his force. I'm going to wind over and thrust him to the chest. I'm going to keep my hands high because that's going to give me a little more defense. I'm going to let my point flip underneath and stab him in the chest. So do the same thing. If he blocks me off toward his right, I'm just going to let my point go in that direction, flip underneath here. If he pushes me off to his left, my right, I'm just going to come underneath, keeping my hands high and thrust him to the chest on this side. So looking at you, from here, if he pushes my point off this way, I'm going to let my point yield to his pressure, come underneath here. If he pushes my point off this way, I'm going to yield to his pressure and come underneath here. That is going to set up the thrust to the chest very nicely. However, that's not necessarily where you want to stop, because even if I stab him through the chest, he can still come at me with an afterblow. So you want to make sure that you quickly move into a defense from that position. It's going to defend you in the initial thrust. Don't get stuck there. So one of his options to use from the cron would be to close in to wrestle. Now, because our swords are so high, I'm attacking high to his head, he's attacking high as well. It actually will allow him some room to come underneath my sword and enter into wrestling. So go ahead, well, he may come in to wrestle me. He could either throw me backwards or forwards. He's going to keep my sword up high, dip underneath, run through me, all right? So my option to that is I'm actually going to use the same basic move I just did to set up the thrust. I'm going to be winding into one of my one of my ox, but now instead of setting up the thrust, I'm actually going to slice against his arm to prevent him from entering all the way into wrestle. So this has the advantage of being the same basic move. For me, I'm just varying the range. So we're going from far range into close range. So but other than that, I'm doing the same strategy for it. So I attack Josh. He comes in. He's pushing my point off to the side. So I'm winding up into this ox. Instead of bringing my point on line into his chest because he's too close for that, I'm going to finish with a slice against his arms. This is going to prevent him from coming all the way in to attack, to wrestle me. And it may also damage his arms in the meantime, which is a good thing. So same thing off to the other side. I'm going to come in, slice against his arms. It's going to prevent him from wrestling, coming all the way to wrestle. Come in here. If I've come in with an Unterschnitt, a slice from below, I can actually press over into an Oberschnitt, which has the advantage of getting his arms down on the ground, and I can slice out and set up a thrust. Another thing I may do. All right. He presses me off to the side. I may push his arms down and come in with a Schnappen type movement. He's setting me aside. I could just enter into wrestling on my own. I got that nice juicy elbow right there. I can either grapple him, fight one-handed. I can come in with and counter wrestle him. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. That's our take on the Scheitelhau. That wraps up the Meisterhau, but we are only halfway through the fencing treatise. So if you look at some people's descriptions of things, you'd think the Meisterhau was all that existed, but we are only halfway through. There's a lot more to come.
Holy crap!
There's a lot more depth to this art than just the 5 cuts. So we're really looking forward to bringing that to you. We didn't cover every single aspect of the Scheitelhau. There's obviously other interpretations and impressions out there.
Which are totally okay.
Which are totally okay. We're cool with other options. In fact, we did things this week that we have never done before, exactly the same way. So feel free to experiment, because we do. But in the comments, comment like how you utilize the Scheitelhau. What's your strategy? What's your thought process into how you use it? Because if Josh is just sitting in Alber, waiting for me, and this is not necessarily the best time to do the Scheitelhau, because I'd almost get the impression that he wanted me to do the Scheitelhau because he had something planned. So in the comments, write how you like to use it, how you utilize it, what's your strategy. And thanks for watching, guys. You guys rock, and we'll see you next week.